welcome to tonight's episode of a joint meeting of Central Texas Consultants Network, several live member groups. I'll let Kai name all of them later. This is our first live hybrid meeting with both live members and Zoom members. So kind of exciting. We'll see how it goes. Our Consultants Network here promotes the development of members' careers through professional and social networking, including publicizing member skills and sharing potential professional opportunities. And we support the IEEE Central Texas section. All of us are part of the Central Texas section, which of course is the local operation unit of IEEE. And IEEE is a large technical association, more than 400,000 members in more than 160 countries. We have several hundred transactions, journals, and magazines, and have more than 1,800 annual conferences. Is it visible? Okay. So next page, please. Our CTCN membership or leadership team is here. I'm Luis Basto, the chair. Jody Everett is the vice chair and treasurer. Bill Martino is the secretary. Kai and Sergio Lieberman are members at large. And Kai is the instrumental guy in getting pretty much most of our monthly meetings going. So thanks to him, we do have some open positions to help out if anybody's interested, including the program chair to help us look for new presentations, new speakers, and also a webmaster to help us upgrade our somewhat antique website. This is the link to our current web page, which shows the current monthly meetings and also links to past meetings and videos and slide decks if they are available. And tonight's topic is product safety requirements in the US by Charles Goertz. And I'll now turn it over to Kai.
Free group, this Central Texas Live member group, and also the Fort Worth Live member group and the Concern Network. Just a housekeeping, keep your audio and video off. And if you haven't done that, put down your username so that we can count whether you're a member or a guest. We just make sure we can count the right number so that we can get some credit to our meeting. Use the chat box to ask questions. The speaker will answer later. So during the Q&A session, please turn the audio, video to ask questions. So our organization, I'm currently the chairman. Tom Green is the vice chair. Bill Martino, the treasurer. And Clyde Spingen is the secretary, and I'm also the program manager, and John Ferris, webmaster. So our plan for this year, we like your input and your topic, or you can be our future speaker, just like a speaker tonight. We just wanted that to be one of the speakers. And we'd like to see more live member participate in our meeting. Last count in January, we're about 459 in Central Texas area. That's north of San Marcos and south of Waco. So the topic we interested mostly technology, 5G, 6G, IoT, AI, smart homes, smart city, and also want to look into finance since most of us are retired. We'll look at our hobby, travel, education. And we'd like to hear your story and your contribution in the past. And some of us are concerned about health. We want one speaker on this topic, health and aging. And also we're interested in the history and what happened in the past on any major contribution. A little bit forecast for next couple months. We're going to have a lady, Alexia, actually, Porter, who's going to talk about AI for 3D conversion. And in June, we have a consultant, Alan Wise. He's going to talk about Internet of Things, IoT, and he's the industrial IoT company. So tonight's meeting, product safety in US, Charles is our speaker. I don't want to say your name long. Goertz or Goertz? How to say your last name? Goertz. Okay, Goertz. Okay. Yes. All right.
I spent 6 years in the Navy. I was an electronics technician and nuclear trained, and then I was when I got out, I had enough formal training to get a job at Texas Instruments, and I went to work for the manufacturing for Texas circuit cards. There's not much advancement there, and so what I did is I moved into an engineering group and got to college. I got a degree in electrical engineering. Then I came back to the same engineering group. And then in 1986, I went into compliance engineering. 1989, I got to division sold out from underneath me, and I worked for Dell for a while, Alliant Tech Systems at Eaton, and now I've been with TUV Rhineland as a safety engineer for 24 years. So anyway, okay, we're going to start off by talking about the oldest safety agency in the United States, UL. And it's not the oldest in the world. TUV Rhineland is older. It was started, it's been now in existence for 150 years. So does anybody know how UL got started? No. You know that? No.
Educate us.
Okay. Fire prevention. And what was happening, the insurance companies in Chicago had to pay a lot more on related losses when electrical lighting became introduced. And so, they're not going to take these losses very easily. So what they did is they hired in 1894, they hired a fire inspector from Boston, and he was to investigate the fires. His name was William Henry Morrell. And so he got an office set up, actually, I've been told, over a fire station. And sometimes he would literally ride the fire wagons. And in those days, it was horse-drawn steam pump wagons. And he'd go out to the fires and figure out what was going on. So what he found was paper was being used as an insulation material in the fixtures. As you know, incandescent lights get hot. Sometimes they caught the paper on fire and they burned the house down. So what he started doing was that he was, Mr. Morrell was performing flammability tests on other insulation materials. And he got some that were pretty good at preventing fires, that wouldn't catch on fire so easy. So he brought, if you bought light fixtures with material that he passed his testing, you got a break on the insurance. And then the name Underwriters Laboratories, because the financing was done through the insurance companies, underwriters. So that's how this thing got started in the United States. Now, we go to some of the terms used by UL. Now, what term did UL use for the approved product?
UL label?
No,
Approved.
listed. They had a book, a bound book, not a spiral notebook, but a notebook, and they would write on each page a company name, and then they would put the models that were approved on that page by that company. They were listed in the book, and that's where that term came from. So they had some other terms that came up. One day there were two fire extinguishers manufacturers in the business lobby, and they were waiting for their UL engineer to come out and get them and take it back to the lab to do their testing. You know, as most companies that, you know, are doing specialized equipment, they know who their competitors are, and they probably worked together at the company that was doing this, and then they broke off and started their own companies. So they were chatting there, and one said to the other one, how can you make a fire extinguisher like this and be competitive? And the guy says, well, after we get UL approval, we do a cost per use version, and that's what we sell. Well, the founder of UL happened to be in the business lobby, and he overheard that conversation. He didn't do anything right then, but they went back and said, hey, you know, we got to start doing something and checking on what they do after we give them approval. So we got factory inspections, and that's where that came from. Now, things are moving along, and, you know, back then there was, you know, a lot of more small companies, and so the guy doing the factory inspection.
Charles, one audience guy asked you
Sure. Okay. How's that? Hey, is that any better? What? Okay, good. Okay. Okay. And so the factory inspections would usually call ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to be there next Thursday about 9 o'clock. And they would get back there. The inspector would come in about 9 o'clock, and everybody's got their feet up on their benches. They're drinking their coffee, smoking cigarettes, and telling jokes. And he says, well, what's going on? Well, we don't have any orders right now, so we have nothing in production. We're just waiting for some orders to come in. So, okay, he has to sign it off that he did the inspection, but was not able to look at any products. So you all didn't take long to catch on to that. They did unannounced factory inspections, and they still do that today. And that's the reason why. And they also do 4 inspections per year, 1 for each quarter. Now, I'm going to bring up another subject that's sort of got an interesting story here. I did call it marks on power cords. But, you know, when you have like cable assemblies that a person would buy, and it's going to go in some kind of system, and you've got wire, you've got lugs, you've got connectors, and there's no way for the inspector to check all the materials, that it was of the proper materials. So what is done is that a label is put on the box, and it says that, yea, verily, this was built with the right material. And it actually had to have at one time the exact number. So if you had 100 cable assemblies in this box, you could have to have, say, like 4 25 count labels, and then you ship it out. And something similar would be also happening with plastic materials, but you cannot, say, have a molded case and then know exactly what the material of the molding was. So that was put on the box. Well, power cords, what they ended up also finding out is that people would come into a store and go to buy a radio, and they ask, is this radio approved? And the salesman would say, yes, look at this UL tag on the power cord. Again, didn't take UL too long to catch on. So off came the marks of the power cord, and it was on the box. Now, in a former life, we were producing printers. I mean, bunches of printers. And I think they got boxes of power cords like in a pallet-sized box. And people would go in there and grab a handful and then go take to the area, and they had bread carts, and they would hang them over the post of the bread cart. Well, UL inspector came in, and he would ask several different groups, what box did those power cords come out in? And they said, we don't know. He shut the factory down because of unapproved power cords. So now it is possible, they have changed the procedures where you can have marks on the power cords. And our engineer in charge of that group demanded that so he wouldn't go through this again. And so anyway, marks are back, especially on detachable power cords. It's usually molded in on the plug. And it says that's not for the plug, that's for the cable assembly. So anyway, that's some of the history there. Okay, now we got to swing it over and talk about OSHA for a few minutes. Before 1970, there was little legislation of safety in the workplace. Actually, there was none. And so there was, lots of injuries, even deaths. And in 1970, there were over 14,000 recorded fatalities due to work-related accidents and injuries. I don't know how they even know how many there were, because there was no law or anything to say to report it and who they would report it to. But they do think that that's at least 14,000 and probably a lot more, because there wasn't any necessity to record it. President Lyndon Johnson proposed legislation for workplace safety. And that was the first time that it was really proposed to have something like that in the United States. Then after 1970, President Richard Nixon signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act in December of 1970. The law went into effect in April of 1971. And big business and Congress were adversaries, since the regulations could hurt economic activity. Now, I got this off of the internet from a corporation called NRT Automation. And what seems strange is Congress passed the law, but they didn't want it. I guess that's typical, or maybe a good majority, maybe just passed by a slim margin, but a big majority of Congress did not want this to take effect. So then we go on. President Jimmy Carter assigned Dr. Bingham as Assistant Secretary of Labor, and then she was in charge of OSHA. She discarded trivial laws and clarified necessary standards to manage serious and health safety situations. And she was very good as an environmental health person. She was doing work with carcinogens, also with stuff that cause respiratory illness and materials that really would harm the workers. So she was ideal for this. And some of the trivial laws, I remember there was always this joke that there was one law of OSHA that said the toilet seats had to be split in the front. Yeah, how does that help a worker? But anyway, and the big joke was, well, it's got to be that way so the OSHA inspectors don't get their head caught in the toilet. I know. So anyway, she strengthened up the laws and got rid of those trivial things that really didn't matter, So things moved forward after that. So then in 2009, there were less than 5,000 fatalities recorded in the workplace. And this is probably pretty accurate, because now there was a law that it had to be recorded. The 14,000 back in 1970, I don't know where they came up with that number, but if you didn't record it that you had a fatality and OSHA found out about it, they really came down on you hard afterwards. So yes, it was bad enough that you had a fatality, but yet it was worse if you didn't record it.
Apple.
So it got to the point where people were things about it.
5,000 still.
I'd say more than one is a high number. But yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I need to turn it off.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I know my brother worked in highway construction, and his company had 2 fatalities, and the workers were on their first day on the job, and they didn't actually have all the paperwork even signed yet. So it happens on construction sites a lot, so, but yes, but it did decrease the number tremendously. And this was the first thing of workmen's workplace safety laws. So then OSHA is responsible for workplace safety. I'm going to bring a couple points up here. OSHA has the authority to visit and inspect any workplace. No matter what it is, they can come in. Will OSHA visit an office workplace? Almost never. Now, let's say you have a toaster in your break area and somebody's warming up a Pop-Tart in there and it gets jammed in there, it melts, and they reach up there and grab a knife and stick it in and hit the elements and get zapped. You have a fatality, OSHA will be there. Okay. But, you know, as far as general run-of-the-mill stuff, no, you know. Will OSHA visit a manufacturing workplace? Or maybe even like an automotive repair shop? They can, and I have an interesting story about this. One of my clients, they hired a consultant to come in to find out if they met the OSHA regulations. And he found a handful of deficiencies. It wasn't, I don't know how many exactly, but he found a few deficiencies. So they were all trying to get these fixed. And before they could fix it, OSHA was knocking on their front door. And OSHA found the exact 5 or 6 or whatever things, exactly the same things that the consultant found. So when they went to pay their fine, went to the OSHA office, there on the counter was the consultant's business cards. So it sounds like a snitch, you know. So if you end up trying to make an audit, you know, find a consultant to find out if you got any problems, make sure you get the things fixed the next day, you know, because sometimes they will tip off the OSHA inspectors. Okay, now, will OSHA visit a construction site? It's almost assured OSHA will. And so that's where they get their bang for the bucks. That's where most of the injuries and fatalities happen, is on construction sites. People falling off buildings, getting stuff dropped on them. And so they're going to do that. Now, as far as OSHA coming to your home, forget it. OSHA is only responsible for the workplace safety. So now, a part of the occupational safety, that's a workplace. But they're not going to look for food violations. They're going to look for, is it dangerous? You know, do you have open wiring or stuff like that? Short knives, hot things. Well, it's a little hard to get away from the restaurant with that, but you know, it's like if you have some kind of a portable thing, like a cleaning machine, and you run over the power cord a whole bunch of times and bare wire is showing. That would be something that they'd go after, you know. But again, that's where they not get their real bucks. They don't really get their
Right here, and you see close, then you'll face the audience.
oh, okay. Okay.
Or you can sit.
Just change the seat. Well, that's too close. Yeah. Either way, I can move that table up, so you can sit here. You can still see it, right?
It'll be okay here.
Yeah.
When you sing to them, the voice will hit the computer.
Okay. Okay. Now, one part of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was to create nationally recognized test laboratories. And that was, and it really, they started working on this in 1973. Though the law said to do it, the regulations were never implemented. And the Department of Labor did issue general standards governing the testing of equipment, and those standards suggested that work could be done only by UL and factory mutual. And that didn't go over well with the other test agencies at all. So finally, Met Labs, they're in Baltimore, Maryland, they sued the OSHA for violation of equal protection, due process, and statutory rights, and seeking to force DOL to implement workable NRTL accreditation procedures, and to eliminate the provision suggested that only UL and Factory Mutual were uniquely qualified as NRTLs. The parties reached a settlement in which the Department of Labor, this is where OSHA is under, agreed to delete references to UL and Factory Mutual and to establish procedures by which other laboratories could obtain recognition as nationally recognized test laboratories. Well, guess what? DL never did establish such procedures. So Met Labs filed suit again in 1987, seeking to enforce the terms of the settlement. DOL was allowed to keep these regulations of UL and Factory Mutual as allowable agencies until 1993, so that they would have recognized NERDLs in their regulations. Okay, they were given the time period then to do it. Met Labs had to petition for a summary judgment to enforce the agreement. In 1995, one article of the summary judgment was that defendant Department of Labor is ordered to remove all references to UL and Factory Mutual from regulations or standards, expedite the review of UL and FM's application for certification, and deny temporary certification to any new procedures or facilities of UL or Factory Mutual. So UL and Factory Mutual had their hands tied. They couldn't change anything anymore. It had to be that, to get things moving again for those two, they would have to follow the procedure and get the nationally recognized test laboratory program started. And one of my supervisors way back when I first got into product safety, he said that UL likes to hire engineers fresh out of college, give them a decent salary to start off with, so they come into the UL organization, but there's not much chance of any kind of advancement or pay increases. So then they leave for the industry. Now, I won't put this in writing anywhere, but the industry then is flooded with ex-UL engineers. And I have been through several NRTL audits at TUV Rhineland, and I think everyone, the auditors were ex-UL personnel. So they're sort of flooded in there. And again, I can see this is what happened, is that people there wanted to keep UL in power. But it has come to pass that we do have the nationally recognized test laboratory program now. One other thing that happened in this, somehow Met Labs was awarded as being the first NRTL, and that's their claim to fame. I don't know how they got it, or for sure it's not written in there, but they state that they were the first NRTL in the United States. What year? Pardon? I think it was in the 1987 timeframe. So I've seen a copy of a newspaper that Met Labs has framed in their offices. It's stating it. I think it's right in those late 80s timeframes. So anyway, now OSHA is required to do workplace safety. OSHA has standards that they have approved that say this is what we need to have to ensure workplace safety. This is the first page off of the website showing standards. Here's the second page. I'm not going to go through all of them. I counted 921 standards listed on that page. Now, if anybody else wants to count it and correct me, fine. But there are a lot of standards out there. And the entire list can be viewed at the website here. When I go to it, I just Google NRTL. It goes right into their website, and there's a portion there I can find that says the standards to guarantee safety. So, but these are the authors of the standards in that website. The AAMI, I know that's a medical group. ANSI is American National Standards Institute. I don't know what some of the other ones are. I know the CPLSO is something with crane safety. You've got CSA, Factory Mutual, IEEE, ISA, NEMA, NFPA. I don't know who TIA is, and you have UL. By far, most of those standards are UL. I think also quite a large have been quite a large of the standards have been adopted as American National Standards Institute, though they were authored by somebody else. They then grouped in and saying, yes, this is one of our American standards. So, there's, I listed that so everybody can see it. Okay, nationally recognized test laboratories. Oh, no, correction. How to become an NRTL. An application needs to be submitted to OSHA. It will include your expertise. You can't have a group of engineers that fresh got out of college and they said, we have a copy of this standard. We're now experts. We are going to want to become a NRTL. You've got to have some background in it that you know what's going on and how to ensure you have a safe product. In this application, you'll have a list of standards that you want to use. And that is, it goes back to that list of 971 or 21 standards. If you're going to approve a product that is to one of those standards and put a mark on there on that product, you have to have that listed in your group, in your list of standards that you can use. Now, I did notice one thing when I went through that list. There's a very, very common standard that's being used, and it's called NFPA 79, and it's the electrical standard for machinery safety. It's not in that list, but almost any NERDL has a category where they list that. So if it's not in the list of OSHA, you can use it. But if it's in the list of OSHA and it's not in your list of standards, forget it, okay? Now, you also have to make sure that you have the test equipment to test to the standards. Now, let's say you're making some kind of outdoor enclosure that you're going to test to, and you don't have a rain test apparatus, and you go to OSHA and say, well, we'll try borrowing one from somebody when we need it. That won't work. Now, there's some very highly specialized testing, and I know in my work, one is for short circuit current ratings. And the people who, there's only like 10 to 12 of the labs across the United States that can do this testing. And they have the facilities for creating like 100,000 available amps. And they'll, on the output of the equipment, they'll do a short circuit and see what happens. And I've witnessed one of these tests because the company wanted to say that, yes, they were very, very safe. And they wanted an agency to come up and witness this being done. The test actually blew a drawer out of the cabinet. And you talk about an odor that came out of there. And it was just, the back got blown off, the drawer got blown out of the front. It was bad, but, so you can't expect to have all the test equipment, especially some of this highly specialized stuff. But the ordinary equipment, you have to have it for your standards or you're not going to make it.
How many times can it?
Well, that's up to the actual agency that's doing it. Nowhere is it written, as long as the product meets the requirements at the end. Now, I know that like in doing explosion-proof enclosures, what they do is they put an ignitable gas, and it's a requirement of what is this ignitable gas mixture, and they put it inside the cabinet, and they use a spark plug, and they ignite it, and that enclosure is supposed to stay together. I guarantee almost every time when they do the first test, it's blown apart. You've seen those electrical enclosures that are about that thick, and all those bolts around it. Yes, it has to go through that testing. And somehow they have one thing coming in with one lead and they set it off. And what happens there is if a gas gets in there and there's things in there that do create a spark, maybe a contact, maybe a circuit breaker. And if the gas gets in there and goes off, it will hold the chassis together so it doesn't come out. Okay. So it's that's very specialized training, testing. And I know that many times it has to be done many times to make sure it's right. That's the ultimate thing, is to make sure that things are done right. Now, the fourth thing that you need is time to wait. OSHA is not famous for doing things expeditiously. I know with my company, we were using a standard UL 508C, and this is for variable frequency drives. There's a new standard out there, UL 61800 Part 5, Part 1, and it's basically the same standard, but it's a different standard number. It took us years to get approved for that, even though we were approved for UL 508C, but to get this in our list of standards, you're going to have to wait for an extremely long time for this, you know. So this is what you need to do to become a nerdle. Now, this is a list of nerdles as of, well, a week ago. It might have changed since then because people come and go. There are 21 in there right now. There are some interesting points in there. The CSA is in there, and they're Canadian based, but I know they have offices all over the United States also. But there are a few others from Canada. You'll also see down there that there is TUV SUD of America, and they're in Wakefield, Illinois. But also their parent company, TUV SUD Product Services GmbH in Munich, Germany, is listed as a NERDL. So they don't have to come through their American affiliate to be able to issue marks to the United States. But you know, there's just a whole bunch of different things here. And in fact, there's Solar PTL, that used to be a part of TUV Ryland. They still may be a part of TUV Ryland, but they now can issue their own marks. But they have a very limited scope of what they can do. Now, but yeah, for their list of standards, they have the facilities and they have the expertise, and they have been given permission by OSHA, and they are listed on the National Recognized Test Laboratory. You can go to the NRTL website of OSHA, and it gives all the different companies, and you can click on them, and you can see what standards that they're available to test to. Now, I've got one here. There's Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio. This is their entire list of standards. Now, if you look at them, the first 9 all have to deal with fire prevention. Okay, why they applied for UL 60950-1 for information technology equipment, I don't know, but they wanted to. Maybe they had somebody in San Antonio that wanted to get approvals, and they went ahead and got their list for it, you know. But those are the only 10 standards that they are allowed to test to. I chose him because I knew they were a short list, you know, so you can follow it along. But again, every one of their standards is a UL standard, you know. So yes, well, I know. Yeah, that's coming out big right now, and I know that they UL, I think it's 2202 and 2201, if I got my numbers right. I know I've seen the standards, I've read them, because I've had to do some work on electric vehicle chargers. And there's this big company out in California that makes them. I can't say their name, but I rode in one of their vehicles, and it felt like I was in a vet. Now, the driver, I sure was showing off. But at the site where I was evaluating the chargers, the car came in and had too much battery power stored, so they couldn't charge it. So we had to take it out for a test run to use up some of the battery power, so that we could put it on the charger and see how the charger would do, you know. But like I say, it was an adventure riding in it. So I will say that we were in Waco, Texas, and we went up to West Texas and got some kolaches. And then came back down, and we had enough room in the batteries to then get some work on the chargers. but it was something else to watch it, but I've also made trips out to California, and somebody was going along on Route 1 in California.
Yeah.
They lost control of their vehicle. They went over the guardrail. They went through a chain link fence and then slammed into a wooden fence around the Chargers and slammed into the Chargers yet. So the insurance company of that driver had to replace the two of the Chargers, and there were other Chargers there that were still functional. And when I was there evaluating the Chargers that got damaged, there was always cars there charging. And some people would sit in the car and read a book. Others, there was some restaurants there, and that's where most of the time they put these Chargers, where it's a hotel and restaurants, so you could, put the car on charge, fill up the car, go fill up your stomach also at the same time. So, but it was interesting, to see, yes. And when you're out in California, there are those electric vehicles all over the place. So, okay. These are the registered trademarks of the 21 companies. Now, when I started putting this thing together, I really thought that UL was the only company that used the word listed. I see that there is ARL, which is the first one, also has the term listed on it. And then on the second row, right below Factory Mutual, PSQ has the word listed, and so does Intertech. So obviously the people that were working there started up after UL. I think everybody, especially in Europe, used the words certified and not listed. Now, if you see one of these marks on the back of the product, generally speaking, you can assume that it has been through the testing procedure and it's as a certified product that has been tested and evaluated for safety. Now, one of my office mates, his name was Ralph, and he was in China. And this guy in China came in with a product that he said he needed help with CE marking. And it was small enough that, he could bring it in, carry it, and send it on the table. And Ralph was explaining to him what he could do to help him out. But at one point, Ralph said, why don't you just self-declare? Because you've got NIFCO, SIMCO, and DIFCO approval on it. And the guy said, what? And those three marks, there's there's NIFCO here, but it's got a square. Theirs is a circle with an N in it, a D with a circle around it, and an S with a circle around it. And those are the European marks that they use in those countries. And the guy says, I don't know what those marks mean. Somebody told me if I put them on my product, I could sell more. And he did exactly that. And he had no idea what it was that he was doing. And Ralph said after that day, what he did is he said, before he would accept a mark out of the Far East, he had to have a certificate showing that there was approval for it. And yes, you can forge a certificate, but you have to have knowledge. This guy didn't even know what the marks were. And it has happened to me sort of twice. I was down doing a field evaluation in Houston, and I got to the product, and it was some kind of big machine, and it had the UL mark on it already. And I said, what am I doing here? It's already UL approved. Oh, we heard you were going to do it to UL, so we gave you the UL mark on it already. Did not know what it was. And then I saw a product that actually said CSA certified on it, but it didn't have the registered mark. And they were trying to pawn it off as, yes, it is approved, but they used the word CSA certified. They did not use the mark. And I called them and I questioned it, and they says, well, we found out we're not doing right. It's not certified either. So, but, generally speaking, if you see the mark, it's going to be there. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The question here is that if a company comes in and has a product that they have been evaluated and they got a safety mark on it and they do modifications to it, that what level of changes do they have to do?
Well, I mean, what level of change do you have to process?
It depends on, okay, if it affects the safety of it, so like you change power supplies in the unit. Well, power supply is really supposed to be a component that you evaluate in the application, that it does not get too hot, that the transformer inside the power supply does not overheat and break down the insulation. So, I mean, but if you change screws in the product, you know, you found out maybe sometimes the screws that your technicians are too much of a gorilla and tighten them down, so you want to put a larger screw in, just so that doesn't happen. We don't look at that. But we have part of our service agreement with the companies that come to us. We say that they have to have somebody that is knowledgeable and report to us the changes. And then we evaluate to see if we think the changes are significant enough that we have to retest. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, you know. We just have to do that on a case-by-case basis. Because there's no real definition of what makes the change, you know, necessary. So, and I'm full of stories. I've been doing this at TUV now for 24 years. But one of my customers was making ice makers. These were for like restaurants and hotels. And some of his motors were always right at the borderline, just a degree or two below the level where they would be exceeding the temperature limits. And so, but you know, I couldn't help it. It was within the limits, and I had to say they were okay. A few years later, I was going there, and I was also doing a factory inspection, and I asked them where all these motors are that, you know, we had approved. They said, "Oh, we had to stop using those. Had too many field failures." So when you start pushing components to the actual limits of the temperature, you're going to end up with problems, and you know, it's hard to find out. Okay, I've got some of our TUV marks here, and this is just to show you some things. The first one is a circle with TUV, and it says US. That means that TUV has evaluated a product just to the United States standards. The next mark has got a C in front of it, meaning we've evaluated it to Canadian standards. The next mark has both. So it says that we evaluated to the appropriate standard for both Canada and the United States. Now, in Canada, you have the Canadian Standards Council. Everybody thinks that the organization that is in charge of everything is CSA. No, CSA is an agency just like UL is, but the Canadian Standards Council gives the authority, and we are approved by the Canadian Standards Council to test products in Canada. Okay, then I also have some of our European marks. The GS mark on the start of the next line, that is a mark for a national approval mark in Germany, just like the notary mark is in the United States. And everybody that does it has to have the GS on it. That's part of their requirements. But then next we have a Bauer, and this is for something that is not listed as a product that can get GS marking. So it's sort of like a private label, but we call it a Bauer, and we can give a mark that shows it's approved. And then we also have what we call a T mark. And there you put down the standard. And again, it's not a national mark, it's a private mark, but it allows people to sort of advertise that this thing has been evaluated. And so we've got, you know, and we got many more marks than that, but I just thought I'd throw some up here and explain when you see something that says CUS or CUS, that's what it means.
Does it make it, I guess, one thing I noticed is US and Canada.
Well, it's what we registered with, yeah, you know, when you become a nerdle and you find, okay, yes, you are one, you have to register your trademark that you're going to put on or your test mark that you're going to put on the product with OSHA. And to change it, I've heard some discussion that we're trying to go to this thing that says TUV Rhineland certified, but we have to get it through OSHA. That's not an easy task. Okay, so it's sometimes easier to stay with what you've got than trying to improve on it, you know. But it's just like project I'm working right now. The guy, he put the TUV Rhineland, but he didn't put the circle around it. This is, you got to get that corrected. So, okay. So now you have to have authority to put a mark on. Now I know this is going to probably be a little slow, but this is a certificate that they generated for me. So I can give you an example. And this would be given to our customers. Now we have an area there for the license holder. And they put in there was TUV Rhineland of North America. Then we also have a manufacturing facility. And that could be the same place as the license holder, or they could use a custom manufacturing facility. And whoever is manufacturing it has to be on the license to manufacture it and put the mark on it. Then on the next thing, you have the standards that, well, we also have a report number, and then we have the standards there is approved to. Well, the guy who generated this for me, he said it's UL 61010, 2012, revised in April of 16. And then you have the CSA equivalent. Though it's the same standard, but we have to put on there what the Canadian standards is. And then we have a area for a product description. We have to have the model. And when we have factory inspectors go out there, that's what we look at. Does that exact model appear on the product? You can't be doing variations of it. It has to be there. And then also you have your ratings, the voltage, the current, and any kind of protection class. Like this one here, class 1, it has a grounded. Now, we also have an area for special remarks. I do a lot of stuff that sometimes goes out in the desert. Well, 40 degrees is not enough for desert equipment. And sometimes they want it marked up that we tested it up to 50 degrees, 55 or 60. And that is it on the certificate. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm so used to all. I know we're in the US, but all our reports, we have all the readings in centigrade. And I can't translate them. You know, the question was about whether these temperature ratings were C or F. Yes, and it's just that we do all our recording is centigrade. And I think even UL now does all their recordings also in centigrade. It's just the universal language. And then the important thing is down in the left-hand corner down there is the test mark that you can apply to the product. And so, and there is a certificate number up at the top, and it says CU. That means that Canada, United States, that is the certificate number that we've used. And we have a database that if something happens out in the field, and they can go by the model, and they can come to us, say, is this approved? Well, if they've done added some extra stuff on there, change the model number, we can say, no, it's not approved. But you have to have that model number. And every agency has to have something like this to issue to the manufacturer, to the license holder, and to the manufacturer that this is allowed to be marked. Okay. Then also, sometimes people have maybe 3 or 4 different manufacturing sites, custom manufacturing. Maybe they don't want everybody to know who else is doing it. So each page will only have one manufacturing site on it. So if they come up with another one, we issue a page 2, and it has the additional factory on it. But the factories have to be listed. And we have gone to factories before that were supposed to be manufacturing a product. We'll go to the front door. The building is empty. Yes. So their license is null and void because they only had one factory location. The manufacturer went out of business.
Does they have more?
The question was, if we have multiple sites, do we have the same number? The 8 digits of that license number will be the same. But then we have a .01, that's for the first page. And each additional page is a .02, .3, .4, keeps on going. And they may decide they want to make another model that's exactly what like this, but now they want to call it XYZ. So we can then issue a second page, and then it keeps going like that. But there has to be something like this when you cannot just put the mark on without the authority, and every agency has an authority like this. Okay. Okay. Anybody know what this mark is? It's RU, backwards RU. It's a recognized component mark of UL. They have a different mark for components versus finished product. And we've seen it before, we recognize it. So this is what you do here is to, what happened? Where did it go? Okay. UL has seen this product before, they recognize it, so then they know what they have to do. There should be conditions of acceptability that says what they have to do to use it in a product. Now, like switches are supposed to be listed because they're installed out in the field. Products that are supposed to be built into other stuff is supposed to be a recognized component. And sometimes that distinction gets a little difficult to distinguish, but that's where that requirement comes in.
I mean,
Recognized by UL.
okay, oh,
Yeah. It's the only company that really has a separate, entirely different mark for a component. Or at least the only one I know of. Okay. Now, what kind of test mark is this? Pardon? It's Europe, but it's not a test mark. It's a manual self-declaration that he conforms to a directive. He doesn't even have to have a copy of it or a copy of a standard. He can put it on there. He has no trouble unless somebody gets hurt. And this is what they call the new approach directive. And there are about 20 something directives now. There's low voltage directive, machinery directive, EMC directive, toy directive, medical directives, and all these. It says at the end, you're supposed to create a technical construction file to say how you conform to the directive. And then you put up together a declaration of conformity, and then you mark the product yourself. And I have fun with this. I have a couple things I say out to my customers every once in a while. They say, "Oh, it's CE certified." And I said, "What does CE stand for? Countries everywhere?" And they say, "Oh, they try to explain to me it's the European conformity mark." And I said, "Well, last time I checked, the United States is not annexed by Europe yet." So another one of my favorite expressions is, they show me something that they say it's okay, and I say, "I'm from Missouri. Show me how it meets the directive." So, but anyway, okay. The Code of Federal Regulations. Now we're going to look at OSHA requirements. The Code of Federal Regulations, it's 1910.303A. It says, the conductors and equipment required or permitted by this subpart shall be accepted only if approved as defined in 1910.399. That is the requirement of OSHA that says the products in the workspace must be approved. Now, let's cut it off. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Repeat the question.
Anyway, no, these other marks are not acknowledged by, or the question was about all the other marks that appear on products. And is it diminishing the safety marks? Well, not really.
From the consumer's point of view, are they confused? You know, when I order not buy something from Lowe's, I don't know if it has UL written on it anymore because I just assume it's okay.
Yeah. You'll find also a lot of ETLs, TUVs now and such on, because we're getting a lot more into the consumer industry. But yes, most people don't understand the marks. You don't know how many conversations I have with people that say the only mark that's approved is UL, which is wrong, you know. They are, all those different 21 agencies can mark it if they have the authority to issue the mark. Now, some places try to confuse things and they'll put on there, it's meets UL 60950. That's not a registered trademark. It does not mean that a product is UL approved, because only when you put the UL with the circle around it, are you saying that it is approved. So people do try to push the limits. You look at their literature and they use meets UL, meets CSA, meets TUV or something. They'll put down a standard like for quality, ISO 17025, and just to try to confuse people, you know. But usually the authorities having jurisdiction know what is really approved and they'll follow that. So, okay, now on time wise, what are we getting at? Okay, I'll try to get through this very quickly here. This right here is the things that are in the National Electric Code, and really it comes in and says conductors of equipment required or permitted by this code shall be accepted only if approved. Now, here are some of the things that are out of the National Electric Code, and I'll use just the first one: approved, acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. So the authority having jurisdiction can do anything they want, you know. And I'm going to look at 4 cities. This will take a few minutes, but it's interesting. We're going to look at Fort Worth. Now, the first time I did a field evaluation up in Fort Worth, I went up there, I did the evaluation, I wrote the report, I gave it to my customer, and he sent it to the city inspection agencies. And about a week later, I got this call from the city and asked me if I did this work. And I said, yes. Well, he said, according to our memorandum of understanding, that you are supposed to send a report to us, and you're also supposed to tell us before you go on site. And I says, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. He says, what do I need to do to correct this time? He says, we'll accept it this time. But from now on, call us and you send us a report. Well, the next time I went up there, it was the same city inspector, and I was doing a place that did gadgets for air conditioning, duct work and stuff like that, dampers and such on. So I called him, and it was a week before Easter. He actually came up on Good Friday, his day off, to see me if I was there. And he also, you know, he said, we were worried about counterfeit labels. Well, I had a roll around table. I had all my test equipment. I usually had my labels on there. But when he walked in, I knew I had my labels in my pocket. And I said, well, I try to protect my labels, and I pulled them out of my pocket. His eyes just sparkled. Okay. The next project, I had this place that made storm windows, all kinds of glass stuff. They get these sheets 20 by 12 foot in. They cut them. They make product out of it. So I called the city inspector and I said, I'm going to be leaving my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. I expect to get there about 10 o'clock. And he said, thank you. I appreciate it. So I get up there. I said my hello to the customer. And I said, let's get busy. We got a lot of equipment to look at. So the first thing we looked at was a machine for making the frames where they put Decosin in for the storm windows. And I asked, do you have a schematic for this thing? And they said, yeah. They gave me the schematic. Well, down at the bottom, it said for continued protection, you must have no more than a 15 amp overcurrent protection. Well, they had a 20 amp. And I also found something else that a component was not approved right. I said, will you change these two things and then I will test it and it should pass. Let's go to the next machine. And here comes this guy out of the woodwork and said, hi, my name is Gary Taylor. I went to city inspection's office. It looked like you have things well in hand. Here's my business card. Call me if you need anything. I was totally dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. But since then, I've had no trouble with the city of Fort Worth. Now, we're going to go to Waco. Waco doesn't want to see a report. All they want to know is that a tag was put on the equipment. It takes the monkey off their back and it puts it, it's on my back now. Okay. Now, let's look at Austin. One of our salesmen went to Austin years ago to see if we should do any field evaluation. And the city inspector said, oh yeah, years ago, we just did one, but we haven't done any of them. Now, the city inspector, the chief electrical inspector has retired. The new one, yes, we're doing work now in the city of Austin. So it depends upon the authority having jurisdiction. Now, let's go to Round Top. Anybody know where Round Top is? Okay, yeah. I think who's that? Perry or Rick Perry, our ex-governor, he lives over there now. Okay. But I have a friend who has a little nightclub dance hall thing, and I talked to him about what kind of inspections they do. He said, not much. Yes, if you're going to build something, you got to have an architectural review. But as far as a permit, no. So there's no electrical inspection there at all. The county doesn't have one either. I know you have to have a permit if you're going to paint your house. I'm sure if you're working for Mary Kay, they don't want you to paint it passionate pink. You can't put up a chain link fence. They're more interested in aesthetics than meeting any kind of electrical code or any kind of plumbing code or anything else. But this is, what you don't try to do your evaluation for where it's going to go. But, this is what some of the authorities having jurisdictions will follow. Okay, standards. One of the biggest things with standards is in the very front of it, they have a scope. I copied the scope out, and like this one here, it's IEC 60335-1, household and similar electrical appliances safety. It says for single phase, it can go only up to 250 volts. So if you've got something that's going to be single phase at 480, you can use the standard. And it has specific requirements. Sometimes there's voltages, sometimes it's what it's used for, everything like that. And the beauty of standards is there's so many to choose from, but you need to choose the right standard. Okay, I'm going to try to cover this real quick also, computer and business equipment standards, because I know a lot of y'all work with that. When I first got into product safety, I was working at Texas Instruments, and we were using, for the United States, UL 478. That's the standard it is. Europe was using IEC 380 and IEC 435. And then they combined the two and added more requirements for workman safety, and they had IEC 950. Now, the European Union would adopt these standards, and what they would do, if it was a 3-digit number, they would put a 60 in front of it. If it was a 4-digit number, they would just put a 6. So they adopted it as 60950. Now, the American manufacturers of computers were screaming bloody murder because the testing was not only just different levels, there were different ways of performing the test, the different requirements. And they said, we have to have a standard that we can use universal. So UL adopted it as UL 1950. They said they already had a 950. So they adopted 950. What they did is they took the IEC version of 950, they went through it, and if they didn't like a word, a sentence, a paragraph, a figure, or a table, they would line through it and then put theirs after it. So you can look at it, you can read what the IEC standard was, but then these were the modifications to it. Almost every page had a deviation on it, but it was the start. Okay, and so it's now changed where the IEC now is using the same annotation as the EN, so it's now 60950, and UL has adopted it as 60950. And it's got a lot less deviations. but it's getting there. So, okay. Well, come on. Am I timed out? The mouse doesn't want to click. Okay, got it. We're going to look at a standard here, IEC 6.10.10.1. This is the second standard that was approved between Europe and the United States, as we call it, a harmonization. UL already had a standard for measurement equipment, for control and laboratory use equipment, different standards. And they said, how can we take one standard from Europe and cover up 3 standards in the United States? So what they did is they wrote 3 standards. UL 3101-1, 3111-1, 3121-1. And they had 5 pages of deviations in the front. And the first thing it did is took out the other 2 names of the standard. So they could have 3 standards. Okay. And then that went on for a little bit. So then what came up next is they then created standards with the same number. So they had UL 6.10.10A, B, and C. Again, the difference in names. But this was to the first edition of IEC 10.10. We were already in Europe using the second edition. And because this was being recognized by ANSI as our standard, we as TUV Rhineland could not issue a certification board report, we call it a CV report, to the 6.10.10 because our national organization did not approve it. And we had to submit all our stuff to our German offices. They could issue the CV reports. But all of a sudden, UL, I think they found that they had their hands tied too. So then they released UL 6.10.10-1, which was harmonized to the second edition. And you'll see more and more standards now that are coming from Europe that are harmonized to the United States. And this is what we're going to, so that we don't have different standards in the different parts of the country. And household switches, heating appliances, and all this are going that away. So, and in fact, that one I had up here, 60335, for it's used for household, but also for light commercial use on farms and light industrial. There's a base standard, a -1, and there's over 100 Part 2s for specific equipment like electric shavers, Requireements, just on and on. So you have to use the Part 2 for your particular requirements to see if it modifies the -1. So, okay, I think, okay, one other thing. Now, if I have up here, I have the 60950-1 and UL 60950-1. That is a binational standard. The same standard is used both in Canada and in the United States. And on each page, it has both of those standard numbers. The same thing with 6.10.10, but it also says it's an American National Standards Institution standard. Now, we also are having some now that are trinational and include Mexico. So you can have the same story. Now, so far, I haven't had to approve anything for Mexico, but I think our Mexican office, we have one down there, would be doing it. So, and I think that's it. Okay. I hope it wasn't too much, but UL is larger than in the United States. UL was the first, but TUV Rhineland started in Germany. There was, as the steam and pressure industry first started taking off, there was lots of accidents, there was injuries and deaths, and the government should have took over the problem of fixing the problem, but the government was nobility and they did not have the expertise. So the industry assessed a certain amount of sales, the percent of their sales. They formed a TUV in each province. They developed the standards and they fixed the problem. then as other industries, the automotive, the chemical, the electrical, telecommunications industries started, then the TUVs moved into there. Originally, there were 16 TUVs. There's still 10 left through some mergers. In fact, TUV Rhineland and TUV Sud 2 or 3 years ago tried to merge, and the German government said, no, that'll be a monopoly on certain approvals. So, but anyway, the TUV started in the 1870s. We started in 1872. UL started in 1893. So, but we weren't in the United States at the time.
Okay.
So it's,
Was it a steam engine?
well, that we worked with. The TUVs were formed to eliminate the risk of steam engines. They were used in mines a lot, and close proximity, everything. And when you had an explosion, there was problems. Okay, so yes.
I was thinking of the question. If I go climb on Boeing 707 airport, very stringent certification process. New aircraft. One manufacturer, the manufacturing process. So there's some add-on like the guidance that controls how the airplane flies. And so that's the certified. So the whole package is certified by the FAA. So now the usually speculation comes in. Sometime in the next 15 years, I'm flying car. And so, who's going to serve that? The FAA, are you going to fight between the FAA and OSHA?
The question was about right now, airplanes are certified by the FAA. And how about if we get to the point of having flying cars, who's going to certify those? And I imagine the government will say the FAA. Now, at one point, UL did certify airplanes, but then the FAA was formed and it took that away from UL. So, well, okay, what you will find is probably an agency of the government is going to be defined to be responsible of something. Now let's look at lasers. In the United States, the FDA is responsible for lasers. Even if you're using it for cutting plastic or anything like that, surveying equipment. But the first commercial use of lasers was for medical, pork Weinstein removal, eye surgery. So the FDA was given that responsibility. And the OSHA is not going to try to take it away from them, and be a nationally recognized test laboratory. And so actually what you do when you file with the FDA, you're given an accession number for your laser. And that accession number tells what level of power that laser is able to produce. And then the agencies will look at that power level and see what they have to do to prevent access to that laser radiation. And so like a lot of printers use it. Now, computers, when they first started coming out with CD-ROMs, they used a class 3 laser, but the FDA was swamped with approvals for computers because every computer had to have a FDA accession number. And what they came up with is they said that if you are using a class 1 laser product in your machine, then you are considered a distributor for it, and you are not considered a laser manufacturer. So that eliminated all that. But some barcode readers that they build into semiconductor equipment to read barcodes of wafers or different parts and alignment, those are class 2 lasers. Then the manufacturer of that equipment has to register their equipment with the FDA.
So barcode scanners with the grocery store, are they class 1 or does it matter?
Does not matter, but some of those are class 2. Even some of your laser pointers are class 2. Yes. Okay, that's a whole other thing.
What are the issues of workplace safety as regards to those companies, manufacturers on the other side of the world that are manufacturing things that are imported into the United States? Are they required to know that a certain level of workplace safety in factories where that stuff is being made?
Well, okay, in the United States, there is no law that factories building a product have to have that product approved. The place where it comes into play is when you try to install it. And really, it's the authority having jurisdiction is the one that's going to really watch it. I have been told by a OSHA inspector, no, we're not going to come in and look to see if the products are approved, but the authority having jurisdiction will. Now, I was doing work in Houston, and what was happening is the company I was working with was in one of those little suburbs that got totally surrounded by Houston, and they couldn't expand anymore. So they had another facility. It was further out, but it was inside the city of Houston. And the equipment that they were moving over there was high power, and they didn't have enough power in this building. So they had to get a city permit to bring in more power to run this equipment. So they got the permit, and the inspector comes in, looks around. He says, well, all this equipment is supposed to be hardwired. I can't give you a certificate of occupancy until you have the equipment in. So they bring in the equipment. They call him back. He looks at it. He says, well, I can't give you one yet. It doesn't have a safety approval on it. They said, what's the problem? It was okay at the other place. He said, that's another city. They can do anything they want to. But our code in Houston says any equipment used or sold in the city of Houston will have approval marks.
Yeah, but
I know they are. They don't have the manpower to do that. It's only when you have an accident and you don't have something, or
okay, so if some vendor is able to make something in a factory on the other side of the world, and they can do it for you, don't have to obey those requirements to keep workers safe in that factory. Any controlling authority of the United States.
that is true. But then a lot of it boils down to the local authority having jurisdiction. Because, you know, if you're going to go buy your toaster and bring it into your break room, the AHJ is not going to come in, and he's not going to have you come in and call him to see if it's okay. But if you have to modify the building because the equipment is too large for the electrical distribution, or you building a new building, the authority having jurisdiction will have you get building permits for electrical inspection, and then electrical inspection will include the looking at this equipment.
Yeah, but we were talking about the year
Yeah.
You know,
No.
over 15,000 fatalities per year.
Yeah.
In the United States factories, all of the safety requirements in the United States have costs associated with them. Somebody could go to a foreign nation and make the same product more cheaply for a factory where it's not being done safely.
Yes.
Workers over there could still be at 14,000 fatalities per year. What's the controlling authority in the United States to examine that? Like customs enforcement?
No.
There isn't any.
No, because see, that's not affecting the U.S. worker. Now, well, the people building it over there, when it comes over here, and if the authority having jurisdiction finds it, or ownership finds it, usually
Okay. I guess we'll agree to this. The fact is, as I see it, it's political view.
Yeah.
Is that if somebody makes something more cheaply in a factory where 14,000 fatalities per year is acceptable, then they're going to be putting American workers out of work or reducing their employability by having that.
Okay, in Houston, okay, we have this program, all the nerdles have this program called field evaluation. And this product comes into a facility and the authority having jurisdiction will not give you a certificate of occupancy, will not let you use it because it doesn't have a safety label. So then we come in and evaluate it. And I found one piece in Houston, they were using green wire as a phase conductor. You know, and that's just forbidden. And there was so many deficiencies, they sent it back to China and said, give us our money back.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but see, we have to go in there, we have to examine it to see if it's safe. Now, some of the stuff coming out of China I've seen has been excellent. And other, forget it, you know. It just depends upon how well they decide to build it, you know. But you know, yeah, you know, we can't stop them from bringing it over here. Now, one of my hobbies is ceramics, and every once in a while I make a little water fountain. Now you can buy 2 water fountains, pumps for that. You can buy a UL approved one, which has a 12-volt motor in there. You have an AC adapter, and 12 volts goes into the water. Or you can buy a non-UL approved one that has 110 volts in the water. Now, when I make them, I'm not buying that cheap one that has 110 volts in the water. I'm going to buy one that has 12 volts in the water that person can't get shocked, you know.
Sounds like no focus. When OSHA is talking about these issues. They're really
I'm not an expert and may not be right. What you're talking about.
That's the
Air trade division.
They're made in things.
I think, I am not positive, everybody online, that's don't spread it, but I do some research. I think that is the resource for what they're talking.
What-
Federal trade.
There's also customs.
Yeah, but I think it's the federal trade commission that takes this up.
Well, sometimes the custom people catch products that are illegally marked. And when they do, they go to the dump with a bulldozer crushing them. Because if you send them back, they'll just come back again. Yes. And one of my counterfeit marks. But okay, one thing I have seen before is I wish I could have been there, but I wasn't. It was UL was coming in, and there were some light fixtures that were going in a new fab here in Austin, and Customs had caught some that were illegally marked. They were made by the right manufacturer, but the manufacturer ran out of UL labels, so they went to the local print shop and had them printed. There was a watermark inside the label that showed up with a black light. And so the UL inspector came to this warehouse full of these light fixtures and said, I want to see that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. They pulled it out, he pulled out his black light, showed the watermark, those were okay. You know, but you know, you have stuff like that. I've also heard a story that when my friend Ralph, my coworker Ralph, that there was when he was in China, this company started producing tools for Europe, and they came to TUV Rhineland first and said, "Hey, we need these CE mark, test them." Well, they came up with a bunch of problems, and they said, "Well, we don't have time to wait for that." So they went to another agency, and they found the same thing. So they went to the loose one, and the guy says, "Yeah, no problem." They gave them a certificate. They put them in several cargo containers of these brand new tools. They got over to Europe. The custom people there said, "We've never seen these before." They looked at them. They found the same problem. And what they did is they told the company, "You can either pay us to fix them or pay us to destroy them." So the company went to that loose agency and they said, "Hey, you gave us a certificate. They say it's no good." "Oh, that certificate was stolen. We didn't issue that." So what are you going to do? I did a field evaluation in Phoenix, and it was a microprocessor test station, and it had 600 DIN rail mounted circuit breakers in this big test station, all made by Square D, and not one had any safety mark on it. So we called the salesman, and he said, "Oh, they're approved. That part number is approved." I said, "Why no safety marks?" So then we kept going back up into the factory and got somewhere up in engineering, and the guy said, "Those circuit breakers are made in India for use in the Far East. They can't put a UL mark on them because they're not, that factory is not approved. And they're supposed to be sold in the Far East for Far East use. But people over there buy them, put them in product, ship the product over here. So they were going to have to replace 600 DIN rail mounted circuit breakers that weren't approved. You know, yeah, that's a whole different story beyond safety approvals. But anyway, so.
I have a, very early in my career, assistant to approve a manufacturer in the Oregon area, and he was making microwave plastics for aluminum plates, and they were all riveted together. And so it was a noisy, industrial type of environment, and the OSHA came down and said, "You don't have air protection for your employees." So replaced all of his employees with death. Oh, different boys, they didn't allow that. They still had to
Yeah. Okay. There's all kinds of stories floating out there about that. I've got some other ones too, but also back, well, when I was either in early high school or late grade school, we got a new refrigerator. And my mom would every once in a while complain to my dad, "I get a shock off that refrigerator." So he finally called the guy that we bought it from. He said, "Flip the plug upside down." They had the neutral tied to the chassis and didn't have a polarized plug. So that chassis was hot. And luckily it was all the way across the kitchen at the other side, where my mom didn't get a hold of the refrigerator and the sink at the same time. So anyway, okay. Hopefully it's been entertaining and informative, you know.
Thanks, Charles. On behalf of Goertz,
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah. I took out a whole bunch of slides this weekend. I say, wait a minute, it's been too much. But oh, I will.
Okay, so nobody online has questions. One guy said, "Excellent presentation."
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't do that one. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. Got something out of it. Because I've got, I pieced together a lot of stuff from different places. So,
So guys, thank you for attending. About 5 to 8, so we close the meeting. Is there any other questions from the group?
Looks like no questions.
Okay, so it's no question, then we'll meet you next meeting. We'll be meeting here in ARC, May 18. Yeah, May 18, where we speak on. So I see you guys. Thank you.